Taiwan was first controlled by China in the 1600s, when the Qing dynasty took over. In 1895, after losing a war to Japan, the Qing gave Taiwan to Japan. After World War II, China took back Taiwan. But soon, a fight started in China between two groups, Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists. The communists won in 1949, and Chiang Kai-shek and his group, the Kuomintang, went to Taiwan and controlled it for many years. China thinks Taiwan is part of China because of this history, but people in Taiwan say they were not part of China when it became a new country in 1911 or when Mao started the People's Republic of China in 1949. Tensions have grown since. Tsai Ing-wen became Taiwan's president in 2016. She doesn't agree with the past ideas about Taiwan and China being close. In reaction, China has shown its military power, like flying fighter jets near Taiwan. In 2019, China's President Xi Jinping repeated China's idea for Taiwan. He suggested Taiwan should join China, but have his own system called One Country, Two Systems. However, many people in Taiwan don't like this idea. They look at how Beijing treated Hong Kong, taken away some of its freedoms, and don't trust China because of that. The United States first made official connections with China in 1979. In the same year, it stopped its official relationship and defense agreement with Taiwan. But the US still has an unofficial relationship with Taiwan, including selling weapons to its military. This happens even though Beijing wants the US to stop selling weapons and not to talk to Taipei, Taiwan's capital. During Trump's time as president, the US became closer to Taiwan, even though China didn't like it. The US sold $18 billion worth of weapons to Taiwan and spent $250 million on its embassy in Taipei. The administration under President Biden has kept selling arms to Taiwan. Biden was the first president to invite Taiwanese representatives to a US presidential inauguration. The Council for Foreign Relations explains that the United States has a complex relationship with Taiwan. The US takes part in military training and talks with Taiwan, and often sends ships through the Taiwan Strait to show its military presence in that area. The US also encourages Taiwan to spend more on its defense. The official US policy on Taiwan is not straightforward. It follows the One China policy, which is based on several important documents. The Chinese Communist Party hasn't ruled out using military force to bring Taiwan and China together. The United States also hasn't said it would defend Taiwan if it gets attacked. Because of this, and some recent events, the risk of a war is higher than ever before. In 2021, the US Department of Defense reported that China's army might be getting ready to use its force to bring Taiwan under China's control. This plan would also try to stop or slow down any help from other countries, like the United States. Experts have different opinions on when China might try and take over Taiwan, but there are some hints. Xi Jinping, China's leader, has said that joining Taiwan and China is a big part of his goal for China, which he calls the Chinese dream. This dream is about making China a powerful and respected country again by the year 2049. So could China invade Taiwan before 2049, the 100th anniversary of modern China? The war in Ukraine has restarted this discussion. Some experts think that what Russia did might make China want to invade Taiwan. Others think China might be more careful after seeing the problems Russia faced. Who would win in such a conflict is not clear. In 2019, China's army said it would firmly stop anyone trying to separate Taiwan from China. China spends a lot more on its military than Taiwan does, about 22 times more. There are a few reasons why Xi might decide to invade Taiwan. These include his desire to be remembered for bringing back lost land, less support in Taiwan for joining with China, more people in Taiwan wanting independence, and a tougher relationship with the US over trade and other issues. How might an invasion happen? Experts think China would try to win fast, before the US could help Taiwan. Before invading, China might attack Taiwan's financial system and important places using cyber attacks. They might also try to stop US satellites from seeing their missiles coming. Chinese ships could block supplies to Taiwan. China's airstrikes would first try to eliminate Taiwan's leaders and stop its defenses. China has practiced these kinds of attacks and has even built exact copies of important Taiwanese buildings for training. Then, China would invade. Its ships and submarines would cross the Taiwan Strait, and soldiers would parachute into Taiwan to capture key places. This would help bring in more Chinese soldiers for a big attack. However, invading Taiwan would be very hard. Taiwan's coast is tough to land on, and the mountains have many tunnels for hiding. Taiwan's missiles could damage the Chinese forces even before they get to the island. Taiwan has strong defenses and many soldiers ready to fight back. An invasion would be a big challenge for China. The US might not need to do much to help Taiwan stop China's attack. This is similar to what happened in the war between Russia and Ukraine. China tested its missiles in the South China Sea that could destroy US bases and aircraft carriers. China has made its military very strong and spends the second most on its armed forces in the world. After the United States, China's army is getting closer to matching US firepower. If China and the US fought, the outcome is uncertain. China has taken steps to protect itself against an attack. They have put mines in the sea and missiles that can reach far distances. Their submarines can also launch long-range missiles. If a war with China happens, the US Navy might not be able to get close to China. China might think the US is encouraging Taiwan to declare independence and start a conflict. However, the cost of an invasion might be too high for China, mostly because of the economic reasons. In 2022, the Rhodium Group studied how a blockade of Taiwan by China would affect the world economy. They found that over $2 trillion could be at risk, not including the extra impact of sanctions on China or a military response. If Taiwan's trade stopped, it would mostly affect the global supply of semiconductors. This would hurt industries like electronics, cars, and computing. Trade with China would also drop, which could shock the global economy and cause debt problems for China's weaker trade partners. Taiwan makes 92% of the world's most advanced logic chips, and a big portion of other important chips. It's a major producer of chips for cars, smartphones, and high-end graphics processing units. Rhodium also thinks that banks would lend less to businesses trading globally, especially with China. This could disrupt over $270 billion in trade between China and the rest of the world. If China blocks Taiwan, investors might sell off Chinese stocks in US markets, similar to what happened before Russia invaded Ukraine. With $775 billion in Chinese securities in the US as of September 2022, this sell-off could be big, and China might try to keep foreign investment in the country. Up to $127 billion in direct investment between Taiwan and other countries, and $100 billion in Chinese investment and lending could be stopped by a blockade. If China restricted Taiwanese products, it would hurt its own supply chains and exports. So it's not likely that China would choose this route. Experts think that because US relies so heavily on Taiwanese chip companies, it has a big reason to protect Taiwan from a Chinese attack. The US has been trying to stop Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, from selling to Chinese companies like Huawei, which the US thinks could be used by China for spying. Taiwan's chips are the key reason why the US cares so much about Taiwan's safety. The loss of these chips would be bad for China's industry too. China uses a lot of chips and mostly imports them or makes them with foreign companies. Taiwan doesn't let companies like TSMC build their most advanced factories in China. The US and its allies have rules to stop China from getting advanced chip technology. This includes controls on exports and limits on what China's biggest chip maker, SMIC, can get. China wants to make all parts of the chip industry itself, but this is very hard. The global chip supply chain is complicated, and it involves many materials, equipment, and suppliers from different countries. Bloomberg reports that the conflict between the US and China has grown from a trade war to include strict rules on chip and money exchanges. This is causing the electronics industry to rethink its long-standing supply chains. The COVID pandemic showed how much the world depends on China for things like phones and cars. Another trend is that investors are pulling their money out of China-related investments because of US-China tensions. Bloomberg says that about 90% of Apple's key suppliers might be planning big moves to India, encouraged by incentives there. The possibility of China attacking Taiwan is affecting their decisions. Some investment funds are reducing their investments in China. Instead, they're looking for options that are less affected by geopolitical tensions. Reuters talked to a portfolio manager at Federated Hermes, who reduced investments in China in 2022. He kept some small stocks that aren't as noticeable in the market. If the situation doesn't change or gets worse, this manager plans to focus more on domestic industries and companies less exposed to China. He's looking at smaller, more local companies that could benefit from increased spending on industrial and capital projects in the US. The question is whether China would benefit from invading Taiwan. The answer seems to be no, based on military, strategic, and economic reasons. If China tried to invade, they might go for a quick attack to take over before the US could react. This approach is similar to what Russia tried in Ukraine, but it didn't work out too well for Russia. China's navy is strong in the South China Sea, but invading Taiwan might not be so easy. Taiwan's military is well prepared at important landing spots and practices how to stop attacks from sea and air. Chinese soldiers who land would face about 175,000 full-time Taiwanese soldiers and over 1 million reservists. Michael Beckley, who has advised the Pentagon and US intelligence, says that the US wouldn't need to do much to stop a Chinese invasion. China and Taiwan's economies are closely linked. Any blockade or trade restrictions by China would probably hurt both countries. Many think China wants Taiwan for its semiconductor manufacturing. The US also wants to protect Taiwan for the same reason. But if China attacked, the semiconductor factories might be destroyed. Even if they weren't, they'd likely be cut off from the global supply chain they need. Making these chips is very complex and depends on a global supply chain. If China tried to take over Taiwan's chip making, it doesn't have the skills needed and would face problems from other countries. China would likely face sanctions and a stop to chip technology transfers. Losing chips from Taiwan would be a big problem for China, which uses a lot of the world's semiconductors. More than 90% of chips used in China are imported or made by foreign companies. It's unlikely that China could make these chips on its own anytime soon. A chip shortage could cost over $2 trillion and cause even more problems in many industries. The effects of a chip shortage are already seen in the automotive industry. China needs Taiwan's semiconductor capacity more than it wants to end Taiwan's independence. The Chinese and US navies might keep showing their strength near Taiwan, but an actual war seems unlikely. Taiwan is too important economically, and neither the US nor China can afford to risk a massive disruption in manufacturing that a serious chip shortage would cause. Now, what do you think? Will Xi Jinping take this big risk and invade Taiwan to satisfy his ego? Let us know in the comments.